The Canadian indie Goliath is back with their fifth studio album, and let's dive in and really find out what is the whole thing about Everything Now. Everything Now from Aracde Fire. So Aracde Fire is the Canadian indie Goliath that really exploded onto the scene and really rejuvenized and put indie music on the forefront. They came out with their groundbreaking album of Funeral, and that was the first album that I was introduced. It was given to me by a buddy of mine who felt like I was living too much in the 70s, and he's like, today's music isn't all that bad, you have to listen to these guys. And hey, they were Canadians, so aces for that. I greedily devoured the next release of Neon Bible. I loved what they were doing. I loved how each album now within the two, they had their own identity. They had their own personality. I didn't connect with Neon Bible quite the same as I did with Funeral, but it still had those standout tracks like Black Mirror, Intervention, and My Body is a Cage. Some of my favorite music that has been put out from the band. From there we go on to The Suburbs. That's where I started to disconnect. I didn't really grab onto The Suburbs as much as I did with the past two releases, but that's on me. I know a lot of people love The Suburbs. I didn't. But what I did love was The Reflector, and it feels like almost a switch, right? Like, I love The Reflector, and I didn't really connect with The Suburbs, where most people love The Suburbs, but they didn't connect with Reflector. With each album that Aracde Fire has put out, you do need a couple of listens just to really get the music, because as I said, each album has its own personality, and Everything Now has its own personality, it has its own identity, it has its own concept. I have had an entire weekend to spend with this album, and I'm feeling torn, I'm feeling mixed, and the mix kind of balances itself out. So first, some of the good things about this album. I love the length, and I love the composition of the overall structure of the album. The album is one of their shortest. It's just under 50 minutes, and I love when an album is short like this because it provides a digestible chunk that I can really dive into and really submerge myself into for that 50 minutes. I like how the album starts off strong and ends very strong. But let's also get into some of the negatives. Because this album starts off very strong and ends very strong, the middle of this album is a slog to get through. The three middle tracks on this, Peter Pan, Chemistry, and Infinite Content, even to some extent, Creature Comfort and Electric Blue, the further in you get into the album, the worse it starts to get, until you start to come out of the album and you get into the last stretch that it starts to become better and better and better. So it's interesting. I've talked to a lot of Aracde Fire fans, and they are not connecting with this album yet, and I understand why. It is much more of a poppy, danceable, accessible album, and there's not a whole lot of change-ups. Like, the song construction, there's not a whole lot of choruses, and the lyrics are just overly repeating themselves. Like, it is meant to be more of a fun time party album, like a danceable album, but it feels very much like on the cusp of Twilight as well. Like, this is right as the sun is setting into the nighttime kind of an album, because the album starts off very strong with Everything Now, the title track. I'm liking the dance groove. It is catchy. That is one thing I will say. It is very catchy, and I'll find myself kind of humming it. And I like that when it goes into Signs of Life, it does shift, and we still have that energy, we still have that drive with Signs of Life, but it's shifted. We're more in the album now, and we're kind of invested in it. And then finally with Creature Comfort, that drive, that momentum, that inertia that's pushed us through is carried over into it. I really like that electrical sound that they're utilizing in these tracks. And with Creature Comfort, that's when it kind of comes to a head, and it's very, very electrical.
Some girls hate themselves, hide under the covers with sleeping pills, and some girls cut themselves, stand in the mirror and wait for the feedback.
So when we come into Peter Pan, Chemistry, and Infinite Content, these songs, I don't know what the band was doing with this. I cannot connect with it. Peter Pan is overly simple, and Chemistry is kind of the same. Like, both are very almost like a love song, but almost like an anti-love song as well. When we start to get into Electric Blue, it does start to pick up a little bit, but not enough to really hold my attention. It isn't until we get to the last two true tracks on here. Put Your Money on Me is by far my favorite track on here. I love the fact that the rhythm here is just 3 notes, but the beat is in a 4/4 time, so the emphasis of each note within the rounds is placed on different notes each time. What I do like is when it does build, because it is a slow build, when it builds into the actual chorus here, that's when it starts to realize itself. And that's when I really start to pay attention on this, because I'm like, ah, there we are. That's the brilliance of Arcade Fire that I've been waiting for. And I like the fact that it reprises twice. Like, I like the fact that it has that. It kind of slows down a bit, and then it is brought back again, and the second time is a lot more fulfilling. And after that, it bleeds right into We Don't Deserve Love, so I usually listen to these 2 songs together. And with this stretch, it's a good 11 minutes worth of just pure brilliance. We Don't Deserve Love is a slower track, one of the slowest tracks on the album, but it used that electric sound that was at the beginning of the album and really like develops it. Like, it feels like there's just the one note strung out through the entire track, and it's just being played with by the band, and it's very intimate as well. Now again, it's very surface level in terms of the lyrical content. We're really reprising the religious symbols here, saying, Mary, just move the stone. You just fall in love with the Christ figures. He would take them down from the cross, finishing off with Everything Now reprised. Everything Now continued. It doesn't completely overlap that first track on the album perfectly, and so when I go back and I start the album over again after it finishes, it seems to miss a beat. And so overall, my impression is it's a lukewarm album. I am enjoying it, and I am revisiting it. It's not a chore to listen to as it is, say, The Suburbs, but I'm not as looking on this as favorably as I did their last release of The Reflector, or nowhere near their first release. So, I mean, like, this is an interesting album to rate, right? Like, for me personally, I would download this album. But I feel like for the musical community at large, probably streaming this would be my final rating. So that's the one I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it a streaming album because I have a feeling I'm going to revisit this album, but not as much as I have their previous work. So that's it for Everything Now by Arcade Fire. What did you guys think? I know it's a little bit different than what I usually review, but it is an artist and a band that is close to me, so I had to get it out there. But let me know what you thought. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.
If you can't see the forest for the trees, just burn it all down and bring the ashes to me.